And like that, Freddie, it's over. Six Nations.
It's done,
completely done. It's done. It's done. And it finished how we all kind of thought it might. Not that it's an anticlimax. My goodness me. There's stuff to talk about. Anyway, welcome to RugbyPass Fan Zone for the final time. Oh, gosh, it feels sad. It feels surreal. But anyway, that's enough emotion from me, because all emotion has to go to our Italian friends, the Italian job. But firstly, let me introduce you to my good pal, Freddie Burns. He's back. Freddie, how are you, mate?
Jim, mate, we're going to come on and talk about it, but all I can do is sit here and eat my humble pie and just say Italy shoved what I said on Thursday right where the sun didn't shine, mate.
The arse.
Mate,
the arse. Fair
play to them, mate. What a result and what a game from them. But just, well, like I said, we'll talk about it, Jim, but all I can do is we've got friends in that Italian setup. I think we all wanted them to do well. And finally, after 7 years in however many games, 36 games, whatever, they finally delivered, Jim. And like, what a way to do it.
Well, you give an apology around the houses there. Mine is going to be an apology, but I also did predict in the week. I said, look, I had Italy down. I said on the podcast to do with Goody that I thought Italy would win, but I don't know whether that was just to get my match point predictor and get myself up the league and just basically throw caution to the wind. Where the apology comes from, though, is the fact that when we did this show on Thursday, I don't even think we gave more than 2 lines, because we were like, oh, Wales, they'll beat Italy. And for that, for our Italian viewers, for that, I am truly sorry. And I will eat humble pie and a lot about it. But look, it's not about us eating humble pie, Fred. It is about us pumping up the tyres of these Italian players, coaches, for everything they've been through. Let's throw the line out there, the Italian job. 7 years. 7 years since we've seen an Italian job. Scotland, 2015. So what I want to do is kind of build up the emotion, because here at RugbyPass, we did a documentary in the autumn ahead of their game against New Zealand, which we knew that they weren't going to win. But what we did get was a rare insight to the psyche of Italian rugby. And let's just look at the pre-match speech from Michele Lamaro. I'm going to call him the great Italian, the young skipper that we filmed for RugbyPass. Roll VT.
È arrivato, Io non so voi, ma mi sono davvero rotto il cazzo di sentire dire a questa maglia che non merita rispetto, Ci siamo fatti una promessa a luglio, Rispetto e credibilità. Ce lo guadagniamo nel campo, Facendo tutto il possibile per guadagnarcelo, Tutto il possibile. Rispetto e credibilità. Andiamo in campo e io dovevo far vedere soltanto queste 2 cose, ok? La prima, Riccio. Andiamo a spaccarli fisicamente, Affrontiamoli, prima la laga, guardandoli negli occhi, e poi il primo impatto, Tutti insieme come una famiglia, nel primo impatto ci sono 15 giocatori che fanno il primo impatto. Andiamoli a prendere, cacciamoli, 1 ad 1, cacciamoli, andiamo ragazzi!
Goosebumps. Respect and credibility. Respect and credibility. And we know as players, Fred, when it's all said and done, that's what it comes down to, right? You want the respect of the opposition, you want the respect of your peers, and you want to have that credibility of winning games, having done something in the game. We, us, them, everyone has questioned Italy, right? Everyone and anyone. We've all, some of us have flip-flopped in and out. Should they be in the Six Nations? Are they good enough to be in the Six Nations? They're growing. They're a team in transition. Kieran Crowley's building something. I've said it. Benetton won the Rainbow Cup. Does that really matter? Not really. Their under-20s are doing stuff, doing things. They beat England in the under-20s Six Nations this year. They beat Scotland comfortably. It's coming. It's happening. Credibility. Well, there's the credibility. You've just beaten Wales in Cardiff, which I've never done, and many other players have never done. And that young Italian team that was searching for the respect and credibility, I think many people, Freddie, watching that game would have fallen in love with Italy. Don't you agree?
Mate, 100%. And I think as well, Jim, is the main thing for me, even if Italy lost that game, say they didn't score that ridiculous try at the end, ridiculously good try, might I add. I think they would have had respect and credibility because they were in the fight. I think that's the frustration with Italy in past games over the past years. They've just been nowhere near. So you're like, it's a foregone conclusion by half time sometimes when they play. So I reckon even if they didn't go out and win, which they fully deserved to yesterday, the performance that they put in, the way that they hung in the fight, like you talk about all the time, when you're in the fight, when you're a score behind going into the last 10 minutes or however long it is, you can always do there's always a chance that can happen, what happened to them yesterday. And they deserved the win off the back of their kick chase, mate. I thought Wales were, I'd be pretty critical of Wales. They thought they could just rock up. They were just sort of spraying the ball around. The times when Wales caused Italy problems were the times when they were direct, they were physical, they were getting over the top. But I think just before half-time, was it 3 driving lineouts Wales had? They shut him down. Wales then try and go to the edge, re-sam it, drops it. But even if he catches it, he's got defenders all over him. So I just really credited the fact that Italy have stayed in there. And they've had their critics, mate, and they'll be fully aware of it. And Jim, we've all been in those teams when you go on a little bit of a losing streak and, people are doubting you, but you have that belief inside. But you can question yourselves. And I just think they just threw it all out the window. And they just thought, we're going to go at it and go at it hard. And as Aaron says there, Capozzo was unbelievable. But for me, Jim, do you want to know the best bit of that game for me? But obviously the end speaks for itself. Was Fischetti. Is that how you say it? Fischetti?
Fischetti.
When they
chase back.
When they go for their own dead ball line, they get out, Iona gets out, bangs it long. First guy in the kick chase is your prop. That's what, for me, that is when, and then he gets the turnover, gets the penalty. And it's like, for me, that moments like that in the game, if your prop can do it, you start going, Jesus, the rest of us can do it as well. But, mate, it was an unbelievable game to watch. I loved it. I was actually in a pub in London watching it, and it erupted when they scored at the end, which was great to see.
Of course, because we all like an underdog. I think it's fair to say we do like an underdog, and it was one of them that it did kind of come out of the blue. But when you look at Wales, let's just talk about Wales first, and then we'll carry on the chat about Italy, and we'll give them the absolute time that they deserve after that result. When you look at Wales, I think they made 7 changes. Alan Wynne-Jones comes straight back into the team. Some would say, of course, I would maybe question it because Will Rowlands has been playing so well. But you look at the emotion that they had in the lead up to that game. Dan Biggar's 100th cap for Wales. I know we celebrated it a few years ago if you included the British and Irish Lion ones as well in that. But 7 changes made. I think you kind of said that they just rocked up, which a lot of teams do against Italy, Fred. So that's no kind of disrespect to Wales because we know, you get a general sense they're either in it, they're not in it by half time because they're blown off the park, but generally they've faded at 60 minutes. That's always been the thing. Get to 60 minutes, and they'll fade off and you'll score a few tries. Where do you see Wales after that? The changes that they made, naturally, Wayne Pivac is going to be brought into question. They won it last year. They finished 5th the year before. They finished 5th this year. A lot of people thought they were going to finish 5th as well, but where do you see Wales now after? I don't even see it as an embarrassment. I thought Italy were that good, but where do you see Wales now?
It's a tough one, mate. And also on that point with Wales, and like you said about people talking about the embarrassment of Wales, Italy won that game. Wales didn't lose that game. Italy were, we've all seen teams where, Wales maybe went away from the game plan that worked for them in games before and almost kept them in the game against France, mate. But I don't really know. It is a big shock loss, especially with it being in Cardiff. But for me, I think I generally think that game is an easy fix for Wales. They'll be sat there, and as much as Italy did win it, it will hurt, and they'll be able to change it. And I see Gareth Thomas here. The players will be the ones that, the players, we've been there, Jim. You'll be more gutted. They'll be their harshest critics. They'll feel like they left opportunities out there. They'll know that they went into that game only a few percent off, but a few percent off a top level sport is all you need to be off. And fair play to Italy, they smelt a bit of blood and took it to them and got the win. So it's hard, mate. I'm finding it hard. It's the same. We'll go on to it later. It's the same with England, mate. I'm finding it really hard to actually judge where they're at. Do you know what I mean? Because Wales got absolutely smoked by Ireland in the first game. No, they come back. They have a decent win in Cardiff against Scotland. They were valiant against England in the battle and ended up just losing that one. So it's like they're in this kind of no man's land, mate, which is a weird place to be because as much as they've lost to Italy and it was a bad performance, it's like they haven't been shocking, Jim. They haven't been absolutely terrible that you're going, oh, everyone needs to go out. They need to come in, change everything. But they're just in this no man's land where it's very hard to, like I said, it's the same for me with England. Very hard to judge because they're in this, we talked about it Thursday about transition, building for World Cups, all this sort of stuff. But they're just in a place where, I don't know, they're almost just existing, mate. They're not terrible, but they're also...
I know exactly what you're saying. Scotland are in exactly the same position. And we'll come on to that. Wales, I absolutely agree with you. They are in a bit of no man's land. They've clearly got injuries to key players. The fact that they're fast-tracking Alan Wynne-Jones back into the squad. The regions aren't performing, but they can pull performances out. We know that they can do that. You mentioned the Scotland game. They only won it by 3 points, but they comfortably won that game. Yeah. The fact that they lost to France and they lost to Ireland, didn't everyone? Yeah. So it's one of them where you look at it, you're like, I absolutely agree with you. Let's just carry on with Italy and talk about Capuzzo. We need to get his pronunciation right because there's a few going round there. And you know what? When I was with ITV last week and he came on, my reaction was, and I'm happy to say it, oh, young lad.
Yeah.
Go on, son. Scored 2 tries when he came on. And then I did a bit of research last week at Grenoble, and apparently he signed for a big club in France as well. Don't quote me.
Is it Toulouse?
Yeah. So I've heard Toulouse. So I did a bit of research last week. Look at this kid. He's playing at 15. And people are saying this lad is unbelievable. And I'm like, really? Well, there you go.
Yeah.
That alone, what he did at the end of the game, I know Eduardo Padovani scored the try, but that alone, to do what he did 70 metres out, my goodness me, young man. Capuzzo.
The thing is, Jim, I don't want to patronise the kid at all. He's but you look at him, mate, like you see the picture of his family. Mate, he looks about 16 years old, mate. Yeah, he's a tiny man. You know, it's great because, you know, even when I was coming through, mate, I had coaches saying, oh, you're not big enough, you'll never make it, you're not big enough, all this sort of stuff. And I was probably twice the size of him when I was blooming his age. But he's, honestly, to play the way he is, exactly that, skinny guy carving up 70 kgs, mate. It just shows that an old saying Mike Tinder used to say, hey, Jim, about skills paying the bills, mate. And that's all you need. Like, if you can't catch him, how do you tackle what you can't see, mate? He was gone. And also, one thing I would say as well, and I thought this actually watching the Scotland game, and we'll come on to it, right? He's a young lad, and in the heat of the battle, when a win is on the line, he had the spatial awareness to pass the ball inside, right? And I watched the Scotland game, and I thought there was a very similar one with Hogg. Was that pass like, all right, it might not quite have been as clear cut as the Italian one, but you've got a guy who's so much more experienced, and he almost selfishly goes for the try himself and gets tackled. So as much as the footwork, that in and out was ridiculous to go around, but then just to have that awareness as a young lad in front of a packed house in Cardiff to give the ball inside so they get under the post and it's an easy conversion. That's almost just as impressive as the footwork and the run from, like you said, from 60 metres out.
Capuzzo, phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I've never been so happy and proud for a team to win a Six Nations game. They deserve to win. Phenomenal effort. Congratulations, Italy. That was Maggie Alfonsi. She was the ITV Italian correspondent. And it was one of them. We've gone round the houses on it, but it's... I think with our time at RugbyPass spent in Italy, we feel slightly closer, I'd say, to other media publishing outlets. We mentioned a documentary that we did that you can find across RugbyPass now, which I think the views have gone through the roof since their win. We spent some time with Zebra as well. We did a documentary on them, and they're just great people. So I think from us at RugbyPass, myself and Freddie, who didn't give you any time on Thursday, and I think I speak for probably everyone who's not Welsh, and even probably a few Welsh as well, thoroughly deserved. You talk about respect and credibility. Well, you've got it now, and it's a matter of what they do now going forward with that young squad that they've got. And Freddie, you Fischetti, what he did chasing back, some of the collisions that they were putting in. I thought Eduardo Padovani was fantastic, Monty Ioane as well, just to name a few, and that Paolo Garbisi as well. How hard was that kick at the end, Fred, in front of the sticks with the emotion, the trembling? For me, I'm looking at that, I'm like, could he miss it? Could he? No chance.
The only thing that worried me, Jim, is if you saw his kicks early in the game. So Padovani, when he kicks with a real high trajectory. So but he kicks real flat. Like even earlier on in the game, he hit one in front of the post, and it literally went about a yard over the bar, mate. And I just thought that, don't get me wrong, I never thought he was going to miss it. But the only thing that did come in my head is he's got a blooming low trajectory on his kick. So if anyone was going to get it charged down, it would have been him, mate. But no, and you saw the emotion afterwards, mate. A very Italian celebration. But you just love to see what it means, mate. Like, it's been easy for us as armchair critics. And Italy will be the first to probably admit that they deserve probably some of the critics they've got. They've not won a game in 7 years. But when you see what it means, and we know, Jim, we've been in this environment where you know how hard you work, mate. Whether you've not won a game in 7 years, they don't go into training and play, touch and football. They are grafting to try and get better, and to finally get the rewards. Yesterday was just, amazing to watch. And you see the celebrations. I saw Tiziano Pasquale, who wasn't actually involved. I saw his Instagram story of them all stood in the airport drinking beers and singing songs, mate. So it was good to watch. Jim, are you there? Jim, come back to me.
Can you hear me, Fred, or not?
You went, mate. You went. I thought it was a one-man show. Can you hear me? Right, we lost Jim. What are we doing here? We're just talking up Italy. Where is Jim? What are we gonna chuck something up for me, producers? Come on, help me out here. Big Jim.
Look at the French team. It took them 3 years to win the championship. We've rebuilt the side from the last Six Nations. I think the progress is very positive. The results aren't the results that we'd like. We'd all like to be winning tournaments and all like to be at the top of the table, but we're not quite good enough to do that now. But within the next 12 to 14 months, where we prepare for the World Cup, we will be.
And you have the backing of the RFU?
Well, you'd have to ask the RFU that, mate. As I said, my job is just to do my job, which is to start preparing for the Australian tour now.
He's back. Hey.
Sorry. First technical difficulty for RugbyPass in 5 years. That's the first one. And it was a big one as well. My phone just completely stopped working, then died. But anyway.
Jim, I panic. Jim, I've got new respect for you, mate, as a host. I panic.
What?
Just a panic hit me. I was on my own.
Yeah, don't worry. Absolutely fine, mate. You would have smashed it. Did you listen to the whole Eddie Jones interview, which I've obviously heard at the back end? But what I wanted to say... I'm flustered. Yeah, I'm flustered here. But let me just finish my point on Italian rugby. I don't know if we didn't mention it. You definitely wouldn't have mentioned it. But Josh Adams, you talk about sportsmanship. Everyone spoke about Sonny Bill Williams after the World Cup giving his medal. But him giving his medal to Capazzo, I thought was a lovely touch. I think it was probably the right person to get man of the match. I know they've got to pick it from a winning team, and 2 minutes to go. Josh Adams, rightly so as well, as his best player. But what a lovely touch that was as well.
No, it was, mate. You love to see that sort of stuff. And also, how good was Josh Adams, mate, for Wales? If it weren't for him, try-saving tackle and then an unbelievable finish for his try. But to have that at the end, mate, it's special touches, mate. It's why we love the game. You see that? Yeah, there we go, Jim. I did all right.
I'm sure you did. You would have done.
I'm coming for you, Jim. I'm coming for you. No, but yeah, all that sort of stuff, mate. You love to see that side of sportsmanship and stuff. And, it was just a nice touch. And I'm glad sometimes that stuff happens. Doesn't really get caught, but to get it caught on camera and people to know what a good... But I actually got sent off once for a spear tackle on Josh Adams. And the bloke even wrote in and said that he didn't feel like there was any malice in it. So I've always had a little bit of a soft spot for Josh Adams, mate. He looked after me. So nice bloke, and great to see him do the right thing there.
Yeah, it was. So we'll just finish. Congratulations, Italy. I know it's still finished bottom of the Six Nations, but the last two games against Scotland, they were good. And against Wales, obviously brilliant, winning 22 points to 21. And like I just mentioned, everyone at RugbyPass, I think, around the world were delighted. Even J.K. Rowling liked my tweet.
There you go.
I know. So not that adds credibility, but it does in my eyes. So well done, Italy. I know we put the Eddie Jones interview up there. We will watch it again, but I just want to talk about Scotland, Ireland, which was the next game, and everything that happened in the lead up to that. Freddie, we've probably got two of the worst guys to talk about going out and having a beer and enjoying yourself and letting your hair down. And I don't want to go over too much old ground. When we spoke on Thursday on the Fan Zone, none of this was out. I hadn't heard anything around the Scotland team that 6 of the players went out for a beer after Italy. More and more details have come out. I spoke about it on ITV yesterday. Kind of, what do you say? I don't really see it as a big deal. I didn't see it as a big deal. But my point being, what is a big deal, and it doesn't bother me, but would bother some Scotland fans and bother this bloke at the airport who was chewing my ear off about it, is the kind of disrespect, I suppose, quite a harsh word, the players have for the rules and or the coaches. I think you should be allowed to go out. I think after they played Italy, they should be allowed out. All the other teams are tweeted about it. When South Africa played Wales in Cardiff, I was out midweek with a couple of the guys, a few of the guys having a few beers, doing what they need to do or what they want to do before they play a test match. They're just beating Italy. Ali Price got his 50th cap. I don't know whether they weren't allowed beers at the hotel. They've gone into a bar. Anyway, they've been called back by one person. And that one person who we can let people guess who that might have been. I don't want to get too much into that, but when you look at that game and that performance, and they've said it themselves, the players and Gregor Townsend said that is the best they played in the Six Nations, especially in that first 40 minutes. And however you look at it, it was going to be hard. That man, Stuart Hogg's getting a lot of stick. I was going to say another S word online. You mentioned that break where he went through and he had the opportunity to score at such a crucial time and didn't give that ball inside. Was that a lack of confidence, Freddie? You've been in that position and you know how good Stuart Hogg is. He's the best player that Scotland have ever had. And I even thought he could have put his boot on it and put it inside some of the three inside support players.
Yeah, I don't know, mate. I don't think, one thing I think with Hoggy, I don't think he lacks confidence, regardless of what's happening. To go back to your first point, mate, the whole going out for a beer and that, I feel like, I understand if a coach says don't go out for a beer, you shouldn't go out for a beer. Like, that's just the thing. But also, you're adults, mate. These blokes as well. And don't get me wrong, we all know they're in fortunate positions, but they've worked hard for it. And it's a real pressure cooker, mate, to be in camp. Jim, you'll know more than me, mate. I've been in a Six Nations squad. I've never played a Six Nations game. But even then, these lads are away from families. They're in camps for 2 months at a time. I mean, is it the same pressure as a single mother trying to put food on the table for her kids? Of course it's not, but it's still pressure. And boys need a release. And if that's gone out for a couple of beers, as long as they're not hurting anyone, I don't really see the issue, and sometimes feel like making decisions on selection and blowing it out in the media then brings more attention to it than what needs to be. So that's my view on that. As with Hogg, mate, I think he breaks through, and I just think he backs himself to score, mate. And that's why he is a world-class player, because he backs himself. When I watched it back, I was watching it in a pub, mate, so I haven't really seen it back too many times. It's probably not as clear-cut as the Caparoso one. I'm not sure whether he thinks that if he goes back inside, there's a chance Ireland get a hand to it and intercept it. So, mate, 99 times out of 100, you're backing Stuart Hogg to do the right thing. In that instance, he didn't, and it was still an unbelievable tackle as well, Jim. It's not
it was key. Yeah, unbelievable. Put your head in the spokes there.
Yeah, so it's one of those where, like I said, 99 times out of 100, the tackle isn't as good as that, mate. He dots it down, and it's Stuart Hogg giving Scotland a way back into the game. But for me, mate, with Scotland that game, I thought they played well. I think obviously Ireland and France are in a league of their own. And the word I'd use for those two teams is just their efficiency, mate. They look like scoring. When they get opportunities, they normally take them. And at the minute, the chasing pack of Scotland, England, Wales, you sort of add Italy to the mix now, but they're the teams that, for all the endeavour and all the fight that they show, they haven't quite got the keys to get through the door to score those tries. And when it comes to playing the All Blacks and stuff like that in World Cups, mate, you're only beaten by scoring tries. And I think That's the difference between Ireland, France, and the rest at the minute.
Well, that's exactly right. I think the fact that we're saying, or I'm saying, and the coaches of Scotland and the players are saying it's the best Scotland played, and they lost 26 points to 5, kind of shows what the gap is, really. Well beaten against France, well beaten against Ireland. I actually agree with that. And Gregor, I think we played really well in terms of creating opportunities, getting into the right places. We just couldn't convert. And again, you've just said it there. Same with Italy. You know, you've got to score tries. They obviously scored tries at the weekend. They scored a few against Scotland. Scotland the same. In a few years ago, it just feels like a few years ago we were in this position where we were making opportunities, came away with nothing. We seem to have got through that. The autumn against, we beat Australia. We hammered Japan. Obviously, did an unbelievable job on Tonga as well. And lost against South Africa. And it's the big teams. Like, we're good, right? Scotland are a good team now. And I think it's what you've said around with Wales and England. Scotland are a good team. On any given day, if we were to play France and or Ireland now, and Ireland, we shouldn't beat them. Like, we just shouldn't. With the players that we've got, the depth of players that we've got, with all the money and all these things. Again, this bloke at the airport chewing my ear off. Oh, should have beaten France. Should have beaten Ireland. Well, no, we shouldn't. No, mate. We shouldn't. We shouldn't beat France. We shouldn't. No. There's an issue in France, a big issue in France if we don't. And I suppose I'll revert back to this with Scotland, and for the fans out there who are watching this, I love the fact, and I think we always will be the underdogs. Like, I think that let's embrace that. And you look at the pool. I won't get to the World Cup now. Whoever does this show going forward can maybe talk about the World Cup. But the World Cup's going to be tough. Cam Mack says Scotland's a small country, 2 games won isn't that bad. When you look at it, finish third, joint third, finish fourth. You got England finishing third in the table, the same number of points. It is so hard to answer the question because so many people, including myself, this is it. We can win a Six Nations title. Obviously, losing that game in Wales by 3 points changed everything, really. Changed the course, knowing that France were going to come in game 3. So I think with everything that's happened now, and I need a bit of time to digest it, but with everything that's happened with the lads going out, Gregor got asked whether Stuart Hogg will still be captain after this. And Gregor couldn't say yes.
Yeah.
He couldn't say yeah. He couldn't say yes. So that makes me think maybe there is an issue.
There's been issues before, Jim, in there. Didn't him and Finn have a bit of obviously had their little thing, and it's just not healthy. But as you said, Jim, is you look at Scotland, and I think the measuring stick we use with Scotland is obviously we compare them to the other teams in the Six Nations. Scotland have two teams playing in the URC. Like England you've got 12 teams. Like the pool of talent in England compared to Scotland, in France compared to Scotland is ridiculous. So now I was saying last night, I was with Hugo Southwell yesterday, and we were chatting about it, and he was saying about just the fact that the catchment areas are so different, and so it's so hard to get teams through that you need that competitive edge, more, and you start pulling Finn out and putting Blair King on in, who I thought didn't have a bad game by any stretch, but it then comes to they score that try, and you can tell that Blair Kinghorn's not a goal kicker. Do you know what I mean? Like those little 2 points just keep the momentum going, keep it shifting. But this whole rift in the camp, when you've got a small catchment area, mate, you can't afford to have your coach and your senior players at loggerheads.
Great point by Scott Valentine. And that's the thing. I think when you look at it, and the discipline from Scotland's an interesting one because they're not Jim Hamilton penalties where you're slapping the ball down and you're counter-rucking and you're starting fights. Scotland's discipline, there's been a few, but the main discipline issue with the main penalties is around the breakdown. So they've been getting turned over for fun or they're holding on to ball, and teams have found a weakness in them. Wales did it. Wales slowed their ball down. France, when they came, the way that they defend, coming up on the outside, pushing Scotland back in, turnover. Italy as well. Italy got a few turnovers at the breakdown. And then we saw Ireland obviously targeting that area and knowing that Rory Darge and Hamish Watson, when Ireland had the ball with the the key people. Roy Dyer's got a couple of turnovers. So the breakdown's an issue, the discipline around that area. And that's going to be the question, Freddie. Again, you've been at clubs before where stuff isn't right off the pitch. Yeah. And I'm not saying stuff isn't right off the pitch. I'm just going based on the rumours and the whispers and everything that's in the media now. But when there's issues off the pitch, you mentioned Finn Russell there a couple of years ago. You mentioned, obviously, I mentioned about the lads going out, and Finn Russell, we now know the reason why he was on the bench, and it would have been because he was out. And it's his second strike. But is there, Freddie, in teams that you've gone and been involved in, a team like Bath, for example, where the discipline and the culture isn't right off the pitch? I know the answer. That it transfers on the pitch, and it's just people aren't joined up, and they're not joined up like they are at a team like Leicester now, who are top of the league.
But here's the thing, Jim, and I'm going to throw a question straight back with another question, mate. Is the fact that they went out for a beer, does it show that they don't really respect Gregor as a coach? Do you think if Eddie Jones turned around to the England boys and said, lads, no one go out drinking, do you reckon they go out drinking? Or like same with, say, France. Say you look at what Sean Edwards has gone in, and I know he's not the head coach, but you see their discipline around their defensive structure. Is there an underlying thing that the players don't respect Gregor, or he's lost the change room, and that's why they've gone out and had a drink even when he said not to? There's something that, like, I don't know what you think, Jim, but I think if I was head of the Scottish Rugby Union, I'd be thinking, well, if the head coach is telling them not to go out and drink, and they go out and drink, what's that saying about his effect on the players and how they respect him?
I don't think he said, lads, you can't go out for a drink tonight. I don't think it's as kind of black and white as that.
How can you punish boys for going out for a beer? How can you punish boys for going out for a beer if you've not told them that they can't? This is what I don't get.
But I think it's been a team thing, like historically at the beginning of 60. Again, we're spitball. Yeah. I don't know. I don't want to ask. So it's kind of like we're talking about something, and we all are. The media has blown something up, which we don't really know the details about. I mean, what is clear is that the coaches weren't happy with them going out for a drink. The fact that Hoggy's come out and said it was a poor judgment and he's apologised shows that they weren't allowed to go out. So they've answered the question, were they allowed to go out? They weren't. My question is, and not my question, but I suppose it's more a statement, if they were on to win the tournament, right? So say they went out Saturday after beating Italy, Ali Price gets his 50th. It's probably the first time they can go out because COVID rules around the country, albeit not in Scotland, but England, Ireland especially, and Wales have almost disappeared. Scotland's a bit different, and Scotland, the SRU, are a little bit stricter in the way they do it. But if they were on to win the tournament and going for a Grand Slam decider, they went out for a few beers, would it have been different? Yeah. Or is it the fact that we haven't performed well, or won as many games in the championship, and we're off to play Ireland, who are one of the best teams in the Six Nations? I don't know, but what I'm saying is that I wish we weren't here talking about it. I did an article in one of the newspapers as well, and again, they're my mates. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be calling them out. No, I was an idiot, but it was different back then. It was different, and there weren't COVID. So again, I hope it all comes out in the wash, and. Yeah, we've got a summer tour, and we've got the autumn. We've got the Six Nations before the World Cup, and I don't want to hear Scotland talking about a World Cup. I want to hear us talking about the here and the now, winning all the games in the summer. I think it's news. I don't know. I need to double check my fact findings, but let's have a look. Lou BRB, we had the Wafflegate for France, but when the team is winning, it's not such an issue. Yeah, very true. So in the autumn, I think it was in the autumn or the Six Nations that was kind of in the autumn, sometime around COVID. As we know, the lads went out for waffles in Rome. So it would have been around the Six Nations. So look, bars, we've seen it. Every single team we've seen. Hopefully it's just as simple as lads went out for beer, bit of misjudgment.
I think the issue is as well, though, is when that Scotland squad's it's a decent squad down there. I was saying this yesterday. It's now, you look at that team, it's a very, very good team. It's no longer, it's got a couple of superstars in it. But then when it is your superstars who are doing it, it's different, isn't it? When it is, the guys that have come out and said, Hog saying what he said and making it saying it's a bad judgment call. When it is senior players, that's when the alarm bells kind of ring. Do you know what I mean? If it was a couple of squad players who hadn't really featured, would it be as big a deal? And when you're Scotland, you can't afford to have those sort of superstar players step out of line and selection issues because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Freddie, quick line on Ireland. Kind of unfolded how we thought it was going to be tough for them in Paris. It was. Every other game they've been comfortable, haven't they? So have we learned anything about Ireland? Where do you see them? You've kind of mentioned it there in terms of how good they are on their day and their conversion rate. Triple Crown winners, first time in years that they've won silverware there. Johnny Sexton playing. They've got an unbelievable squad depth. Young lads coming through. But any back three player they want to choose from. It all looks good in Ireland at the minute.
Yeah, no, it does, mate. I think they've been, the way they, even that first game, it's always hard. They were so good in that first game, weren't they? And they were good in Paris. They were good. They've been good all tournament. But that first game against Wales really set the tone for them. And they'll want to keep pushing on. I think I still think if Sexton gets injured or something happens to Sexton, where do they go? Because as much as Carberry stepped in and did well, Sexton is in a league of his own with that team, and they just function differently with him in it. So that would be the only question mark I have. Other than that, mate, like they've had a great tournament. That game in Paris could have gone either way, really. And they build it nicely ahead of the summer, ahead of next year. So, mate, I think it's hard to talk about. And they've been quality. I've just loved the way they've gone about their business. And them and France are just up in a different league to their own, to the other four.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Right, let's come on to the final game. Grand Slam, Le Crunch, the build-up to that game. It is, in my opinion, Freddie, everything we thought it was going to be. Rightly so, we spoke about it on Thursday when you looked at the England team. When you looked at the game, like, what was your kind of feelings around the English performance?
Mate, again, it's been a bit of a story of England's Six Nations, where it's almost been valiant in defeat. Similar against Italy the week before. I know they had Charlie Ewell sent off, so it was always going to be a tough task. But they were knocking at the door. The endeavour and the fight that they show is unquestionable. However, yes, Freddie Stewart scored a good try, but I never really felt. Every time France got the ball, you're thinking something's going to happen here. Like, they're on the edge. Whereas England, especially in the first half, I don't think they really got into the 22 too many times. They didn't threaten a great deal. Or when they did, you never felt any panic in the French defence. Whereas when France attacked, you thought France could score with every touch, really, couldn't they? And that's not a slight on England. I think that just shows how good this French team is. It was interesting hearing that Eddie Jones interview. They seem, I think England will be relatively happy. They feel like they've not quite got the rewards for their hard work, but they're definitely in it. And it was a hell of a test match, Jim, wasn't it? It was played very fast. It was good, but I just never really felt like England were going to win.
It did feel, it did feel like that. And I think from a French perspective, without drawing comparisons to the All Blacks when they were doing their thing and they went on, ridiculous 12, 13 game runs unbeaten. That's what the French team looked like. It just looked like when they needed to turn it on, they could. And they did. And they had, however you wanted it. If you wanted it up the guts, if you wanted to go wide, if you wanted to put a little chip over the top, however you wanted it, they give it you. And I just look at that French team. I look at the profile of it. I look at the age gap. I look at the two people in the front row of that, Antoine Dupont and Cyril Bay, 1 and 9, just to name two. I mean, just both the leading players in their position. We could go through the whole team, Freddie, 1 to 15, and say, yeah, he's the best player in his position in the world, if not the second, maybe the third at a push. If you look at some of the bench players, they're just the complete team. And, on the England thing, I actually thought England gave him a good go. I thought the tactics were right. I loved seeing Freddie Stewart on the wing. I'd love a couple of lines on him, Fred. Mate, he is phenomenal. Has there ever been anyone better in the air than Freddie Stewart?
Jim, do you know what he reminds me of, right? And here's a throwback to any listeners. He reminds me, he's a cross between like what Matt Perry was back in the day when he played fullback for England and the Lions, and Mike Brown. He's got this unbelievable ability to stay on his feet, be strong. He's a great finisher, but his aerial skills are ridiculous. And one thing I'll say, Jim, is I didn't see much of Leicester's games last year because obviously I was playing in Japan. And I came in, he was with England in the summer for a little bit, so I only seen him training for a few weeks and that, and he was good in the air. And we played Exeter in the first game, and he was unbelievable. And the one thing with Freddie that I think his best asset is he's just test match temperament, mate. His level of just, he's never flustered, he's never too far up, he's never too far down. His level of consistency and temperament is unbelievable. And as for a guy not in the air, yeah, you're right, Jim. I'm struggling to find, in my mind, anyone who is as good or commands the air like him. And he's still so young, mate. Like, he's only going to get better. But he was unbelievable. I think for me, the one thing I think the answer England need to struggle is where do they get their punch in the back line. I felt like when you've got Smith, when you've got Ben Youngs or a Harry Randall, when you've got guys like Slade, you've got Freddie Stewart, you've got these players, you need someone to get them over the game line a bit more. And I thought England were very smart with how they the tactical kicking game. They kicked a bit early, but I think that's because they knew that they weren't going to get much game line success from Bailey. I thought Marchant had a good game, to be fair to him. But when you sort of see a Dante for France, no, there was one phase of play in the first half. I think he carried, and then I think Wacky comes around the corner, he carries. Then Aldrit comes around the corner, he carries, and you're just thinking it is power, power, power. But they've all got the ability to have that finesse and play. And only a few years ago, when England were flying, mate, you got to remember they were using Big Billy
Vunipolas,
using Mako, and it was big fellas that could carry and get them over the game line. And I'm not like, I just look at that England team. Genji, phenomenal again. I love the way they put him in the backfield, mate, and just let him charge back. But he carries well. Don Brandt carries well when he's on the pitch. Simmons does, but that French team is 1 to 15. Like Dupont carries in traffic, mate, and he bumps about 4 people. Do you know what I mean? They're just a different level, this French team. And that's the thing for England, mate. Sorry, just to go back to it, is what do they do when they haven't got Manu? And I know Manu's not played for years, and people will say, "Oh, you've got to stop talking about Manu. He's not been there for." But he's the guy who gives England the go forward, and you get him over the game line. Well, he gets you over the game line. You just suddenly watch Smith come in. Smith didn't have a bad game yesterday, but you could tell that he wasn't playing on that front football with all that space and time that he likes. And they need to find some power from somewhere.
I think you're exactly right. And carrying power, Maro Itoje tries to carry ball. We know that carrying isn't his biggest strength, and using Genji, absolutely, and he delivered as well when he carried. But you look at that French team, whoever they give the ball to, mentioned Cyril Bay, Machan, Woki, Antonio, Taufi Fanua when he came on as well. All of the back row, you've still got Olivier to come back. Vakatawa when you talk about carrying Jalibert. I mean, you talk about the power, and again, Ireland, you look at them, Caelan Doris, Ty Byrne, Josh van der Fleer, Conan, Furlong, whoever. Like, there's so many players. That's Ryan Beard. Even when he carries, he didn't play, but whenever he carries, he's phenomenal as well. Power. And you're right in terms of England struggling. One of the things coming out of it, and I think we can agree, one thing we can agree with, I think everyone can see, when you look at the profile of the England team and the age and the profile, like some of the players, like people wouldn't have heard of, Ollie Chesham, who came on and did really well. Will Stewart as well, who had his first start, who I thought actually played really well. So the transition that this team are in, and I know you've listened to the VT when my internet went down, but just have a listen to this from Eddie Jones, and we'll just kind of dissect if we believe what he's saying, because the RFU have come out and said that they're going to back him.
Look at the French team. It took them 3 years to win the championship. We've rebuilt the side from the last Six Nations. I think the progress is very positive. The results aren't the results that we'd like. We'd all like to be winning tournaments and all like to be at the top of the table, but we're not quite good enough to do that now. But within the next 12 to 14 months, where we prepare for the World Cup, we will be.
And you have the backing of the RFU?
Well, you'd have to ask the RFU that, mate. As I said, my job is just to do my job, which is to start preparing for the Australian tour now.
Same answer as Wayne Pivac. He doesn't make the decisions. But some might say that Eddie Jones has a bit more power over the RFU than Wayne Pivac does over the WRFU. I believe him. And when I see it, I don't know, like you've mentioned, we're looking for something that arguably in England we haven't got. And what would another coach bring in before the World Cup that Eddie Jones isn't doing? He's taking risks. I tell you what, he's taking risks. He's bringing in lads, like bringing in Furbank, for example. Now, he's been brilliant for Northampton. We know he's played for England. You mentioned 2 years ago he made his debut, I think, in Paris. I think I read today. Don't quote me on all this. I'm obviously spitballing all the time. But with making decisions like that, Freddie, like he's doing it for a reason, isn't he? He's not just doing it on he's not just not winging it, is he? He's one of the best coaches in the world. I think that he must have this grand plan in the lead up to the World Cup. You know, he's been phenomenal for England in some of the results, but naturally it's going to come into question because, well, I say they've had a poor Six Nations. They finished third. So, but they've not had a Six Nations in which many people believe England should have, and that is be up there with France and Ireland competing for a championship. So do you believe in Freddie when he says about this transition, or do you think he's hiding behind it because he knows that he's struggling?
No, I don't think there's any panic in that England setup. From talking to a couple of the lads from that interview, I think they will be relatively happy with where they are and what they've done. I said it earlier, they've been valiant in defeat, haven't they? Without quite getting the rewards yet. But I felt yesterday with the team he picked, it was going to go one of two ways. I thought if France ended up running away with it, people would say he's lost his head, he's clutching at straws, Eddie Jones has got to go. That's what I reckon people would have said. They didn't. They fought valiantly. They really took it to France. All right, they lacked that efficiency that we spoke about France and Ireland having. But again, I do feel like they will see this as them still taking steps forward. All right, maybe not as big a step as everyone wants, but I still think they'll think that they've taken steps forward. I think it's been good for Marcus Smith. I think it's almost been a blessing in disguise. Farrell being out, not because he doesn't add to England, but it's been good to see Marcus Smith have to take the responsibility of goal kicking, of all that, and I think he stepped up well. So I never really thought the RFU were going to get rid of Eddie Jones this near to a World Cup. You know, I think it's too late to get him out. And like I said, I generally think they'll be relatively happy with where they are, Jim, and where they're going. They'll stay pretty confident in that camp. They might not be where they want to be, but I feel like they would have thought they've taken steps forward in some ways. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, Fred. I like the profile of the England team. I think the young lads that he picked are former players, come through the system. You're 100% a team that's in transition when you drop Mako and Billy Vunipola and you haven't got a Manu Tuilagi. You've not got a George Cruz in there as well. Like, as in, we're talking top end world-class players. Look at Wales, Talupe Faletau, to draw comparisons to him and Billy Vunipola. You need a team like that. And if you don't, then you're a team in transition. You're a team that's looking for something else. Freddie, I'm going to give this question to you because we don't have long left. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Owen Farrell. Have England missed him? I know it's been good to see Marcus Smith, and we talk about not being able to field a player like Manu Tuilagi. The big question is going to be going forward for this England team and into the World Cup is, does Owen Farrell come back, and does he come back as captain? Have we lacked leadership? Have we lacked a player like him? Have we lacked a player that is as world-class and demands the standards that he demands and that could potentially challenge players and coaches both up and down?
I think you'd have a better understanding of what Owen Farrell brings, having been in that Saracens environment with him for a bit longer than me. I was in an England setup with him when he was younger. I think you always miss someone who drives the standard and is as big a leader as Owen Farrell is. That said, mate, he wasn't in the best of form like before he got injured. You know, last year he wasn't in the best of form. So from a performance point of view, you can't turn around and say, yeah, 100% England have missed Farrell. I think they would have just lacked that little bit of leadership. But then you can argue, would he have overpowered Smith a little bit? And would we have found out everything we have about Smith so far if Farrell was there doing the kicking, driving the team, probably making the calls and stuff like that? So it's a real hard one, mate, to answer. I think if he's fit, he does come back because he is Owen Farrell and he has You know, you talk to people about him. You know, he is an elite player. He is a kind of Michael Jordan-esque leader where he doesn't sort of suffer any. He doesn't take any drop in standards, does he? He demands that. So I think he 100% comes back in. Whether it's a good or bad thing for him, I guess time will tell. It'll be interesting to see in the summer if he's back. Where they're Australia in the summer. It'll be an interesting thing to see how him and Smith go. Again, for me, England are a nice team at the minute. They're nice, especially in the backs. Nice players, but there's no one who really is that confrontational in the backs, especially. And I think that's what Owen would give you is, you know, someone who plays with their shoulders back, their chest up, isn't afraid to sort of stand over people, sort of getting amongst it. You know, we know all the questions over his tackling technique over the years and stuff like that. But he is someone who throws it around and can mix it. But for me, like I said, I've gone there before, but you're lacking a man, or you're lacking a real big power player in England's midfield for me. So if Owen Farrell comes back, he goes straight in because he's Owen Farrell. But it's a hard one to say, mate, because he's been sort of out of that setup for a couple of years now, really. Or he wasn't in form last year, was he?
Yeah, I think he comes back in, having been under a bit of pressure, watching it unfold. I think it's been a positive for England, the fact that he hasn't played in terms of all the things that you've said, given Marcus Smith the keys to the kingdom, but I don't think they make him like Owen Farrell. England don't have players like him, and I think him with a bit between the teeth, understanding that there's a chance that he might not come straight back in, I think is going to make him and make England better. I also believe that there are certain players that don't need to be at 100%. Alan Wynne-Jones, you know, for one, the fact that he's been brought straight back into the team. Johnny Sexton as well for Ireland, the fact that he can be limping into a game and they know as captain how much he brings. I think Owen Farrell fits into that slot, and I think that Eddie Jones knows how important that he is. And like you said, England have been lacking something, and you know, the only place that we can look is to someone like Owen Farrell, because we can't keep looking at Manu, unfortunately, as much as we're desperate to see him back. So,
question, Jim. Quick question: and when he comes back, does he come back in at 12 or at 10?
Yes.
Come back 12. In at 12. Yeah.
Comes back in at 12. I think you could play Slady at 13. You can play Marchand at 13. We know that we've got players in and around that. The big question comes if Manu's fit, right? Yeah. So where does it all fit in? Manu will go 12 or 13. I think they'll go Farrell at 12, Manu at 13. But hey, what the hell do I know? I'm just an ex-Scotland player who used to get yellow carded. But quickly, Freddie, before we go, how far can France go? World Cup, 18 months' time. Grand Slam champions. They look unbeatable at the minute. That man. They've got Sean Edwards. Can they go all the way? Can France win the World Cup? If they can, who's going to be up there with them? Who's going to be competing, do you think? What have you seen enough of? And we've got to remember, everyone's talking about New Zealand, but they've struggled. Yeah. You know, they've struggled over the last year, whatever that means. They've lost 2 or 3 games. But this French team, who is going to challenge them in their home turf for a World Cup in 18 months' time?
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say, is the fact that it is in France. I think they go, at the minute, they're going into that tournament bang on favourites to win it. I always say this, Jim, I said it about England at the last World Cup as well, is I think the teams France might struggle against are your teams like Wales and your teams like South Africa, the teams that want to just have a kicking game, want to keep it tight, want to slow the ball down and sort of strangle the game. You saw what happened to England. England beat, in the last World Cup, they beat New Zealand because New Zealand were a team that even when they're not playing the best, they still play. Whereas they struggled when in the final, when South Africa deployed a kicking game and the pack sort of beat them up. So that's the teams I see undoing France would be, say, like even in Cardiff the other week, you saw that as much as France, they weren't comfortable, but it was, you know, it was a good win for France in Cardiff. Once Wales got their kicking game going and strangled them a little bit, there was one game. That's probably the only game you thought that France might lose in this Six Nations as it was happening. So that's the teams I see unpicking France. But the way I see it as well, Jim, I don't know how you feel, but if this French team show up, I generally don't think many teams have got that big a chance against them. It's how do you get them off their game?
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, we know in the past, Jim, French teams are their own worst enemies sometimes, and they're the downfall of their own success. So we'll see. But I just love watching them at the minute, Jim. I'd pay a lot of money to go and watch that French team. Even yesterday, I'm an English man. I want England to win, but at the same time, there's a little bit of me that's hoping that France put on a clinic just so you can watch rugby played how it should.
Yeah, absolutely. Freddie Burns, we'll leave you with that. We'll leave Fan Zone for this season on that as note. This weekend belongs to rugby. I thought rugby across the board was fantastic, but it belongs to France and Italy. The two bookends of the Six Nations Championship. France, Grand Slam winners, which we all thought would have been the case the way that they've done it. Truly, truly exceptional in some parts of their game. And to Italy for that win, 22 points to 21 down in Cardiff. You talk about what we saw, respect and credibility. That's what their captain wanted. He mentioned that on the RugbyPass doc that we did in Italy ahead of the All Blacks. And that's exactly what they've got and exactly what we're giving them. So Freddie Burns from myself, Jim Hamilton, speaking in the third person, and RugbyPass. This has been Fan Zone. It's been a joy to bring you this every week, and stay safe. And we've got a feature coming out this week on Chris Ashton, your teammate. Rugby Roots coming out Thursday, Friday. So check that out as well, across with all the other stuff that we're doing out there. So big love.